So here we have our leaky differential cover. This is on the front. Obviously it's leaking. You can see pretty obvious why this one's leaking. It's been sitting a while. The gaskets are bad. These are actually, as I touch them, not even torqued to spec, so that probably has a lot to do with it too. Lots of years heating up and cooling probably I would anticipate being the culprit of this. So this isn't good. If you can grab these, and that one's on tight, but spin these with your fingers, not a good deal. So what we'll do in this episode is replace this differential cover. I've got a new one, and I'll show you how to make a new gasket. So the first thing you want to do is obviously get your area set up. So we have our drain pan ready, right underneath of my front differential. This is on a 1984 GMC Jimmy. It's a GM 10 bolt. So what I'll do now is pull out all of the bolts. They are all 13 millimeter. And so you want to pull all of these lower ones out, leaving this top one in. And the reason being, you want just this to flop off and get fluid everywhere, so it'll give you an easy way to drain this guy. So we have all of our bolts out, less one. This one I've loosened up, so we can take this whole housing and break the seal, and it will drain out the bottom. This pan will stay on because you left your bolt in place. So we'll take a flathead, and I'm not going to salvage this housing. So just like that, and just break that seal slowly, and all that gear oil will dump out. All you need to do is just make sure you let it all drain out. I'll move this camera down a little bit. And then once that's drained, and you're not going to make a mess, you can take this last bolt out and remove this differential cover. Just like so. So now that we have this opened up, you want to make sure all of your gasketing material is off the mating surface. I will also use a rag and mop up all this old oil that's in here just to clean it up a little bit more, as much as I can. You'll see a lot of people spray brake clean in here. I'm not a fan, but you know, it does do a good job when you're cleaning surfaces. Maybe if you want to put it on a rag, kind of wipe out this stuff, just to, obviously you can see, very dirty still. So we'll spend some time cleaning that up, but what you really want to do is just make sure all these surfaces are nice and clean, so when you put your gasket material on here, it will, you know, mate up perfectly and you won't have leaks. So I'll spend some time cleaning this up and come back and show you how to prep the differential cover for installation. Here's our new differential cover. I'm working to prep this for installation. On these chrome differential covers, this material is so slick, and what we're going to do today is build our own gasket, which I do all the time, and it works perfectly fine. I recommend taking, you know, some 220 and just scuffing up this material, just so that what that does is it gives this a little area, all these little grooves that you've created, something for this to really stick to so it doesn't slip. So I highly recommend that. Also, before you do your installation, always take some brake part cleaner and just give this a good easy clean. Nothing too crazy, but just to get all the factory oils, the impurities off of it. So I'll go around, and just like this, you just very, very lightly go around between all the bolts where the bolt holes are, and just scuff that up uniformly. And that'll, like I said, just give it enough grit that this new RTV gasket maker, something to stick to. Now that our differential's prepped, we need to make our own gasket. Make sure that when you go to wherever you buy your RTV, if you're making your own gasket, you buy an actual specific gasket maker RTV for this one's high temp. For this application, just again ask at the parts counter, and they'll, you know, most of the people will be more than happy to help you buy the right stuff. Don't just go buying some random blue or black RTV and think it's going to work, because you need the right application or else this will fail. Some of this stuff is, if it gets mixed in with your differential fluid, will ruin all your bearings. It can be a bad deal. So always make sure you buy the right gasket maker. Lid screws off, pokes a hole, cap goes on, and then you just apply. And I try to do one even bead, just so that the coating is consistent all the way around the differential cover. And I'll come back and smooth this out. And I always stay to the inside of the bolt holes, because that's where, if anywhere separates when you put this back together, right here is going to be the spot, just because this material is so thin on the housing. Then I always come back and do an extra little bead around the outside of the bolt holes. There you have it. It's that easy. I'll thicken up a few of these little spaces where it's, not quite, where I didn't put quite as much material between here and the edge of the plate, just so I get a really good gasket. But once you put this stuff on your housing, you need to let it set for 5 minutes before you try and mount it up to the pumpkin. So what we'll do now is I will finish, putting more of this stuff on where it needs to be, and I'll let it set for 5 minutes. And then we'll show you how to mount it to the pumpkin housing. It's been 5 minutes. Our RTV gasket maker has had enough time to cure, so we've got it ready to go. Now what you want to do is, same way you disassembled this, I always start with the top bolt so that it has a place to hang. Ever so carefully line this guy back up. Just like so. And then continuously work your way around the pumpkin in a star pattern, putting these bolts back on just hand tight. And what that'll do is it will leave just enough gap in there to let this gasket form up properly, because you don't want to torque it down right away because this gasket maker's still wet. So this just kind of gives the first basic form to the pumpkin for your gasket. So it'll set up and there'll still be thickness in it, a couple millimeters thick, to actually form a gasket. Because if you just screw this down all the way out of the gates, it'll smush all that material up out of the way and your gasket won't be tight. So you just want to put this on hand tight, about 5 pounds if you were using a torque wrench. And, make sure it's as consistent as possible all the way around, because you want your gasket to form up flat. And so what I'll do is screw the rest of these on. I'll let this thing sit for about 45 minutes. And then I'll come back out and torque this down to spec. So our gasket has had ample time to cure. Next thing you want to do is find out whatever torque spec is for your vehicle that you're putting a new differential cover on. This one is 20 foot-pounds. And so next thing you want to do is I always start with the top and take these guys all to 20 foot-pounds torque spec, and you do it in a star pattern. So here, down to here, down to here, up and back over, and just make sure you keep that star pattern the whole time, so you're snugging that differential cover down evenly the whole time. So once your bolts are completely torqued down to factory spec, you want to add in the gear oil fluid. For this Chevy 10-bolt front end, it takes 75, weight 90. Again, auto parts stores are more than happy to help you figure that out. But without further ado, you just dump it in there until it's full. And you'll know when it's full because it will start leaking out of this bolt hole. So the filler plug hole. And once I get this full, I'll show you how to prep that area, how to prep the filler plug so that it won't leak. The final part that you need to do to complete this installation is take your drain filler plug, and you want to put some thread sealant on it. So what that'll do is keep the fluid when it's moving around there from leaking out of the housing. This is just like rubber cement consistency wise, but you just paint it on the threads. Making sure you get them all. Now we're ready to install this to factory spec. Again, look this up for what your GM is. I believe that this one is 40 pounds, but I'll just hand crank this tight down for now just to show you guys what the final installation looks like. So the last part of the installation, we have our thread sealant on our filler plug hole. Just put that in there and just thread it on in. Pretty straightforward. And that is the completed installation.